Suburban Sentinel here, along with Bella the camera cat, and tonight we're going to do a little demonstration of a quick and easy way to clean box type firearms magazines. The magazine shown on the screen here is from my .308 bolt action rifle. It's a 10 round accurate mag. The method we're going to detail here tonight certainly isn't the only way of cleaning a magazine, but it is a method that I find effective, efficient, and inexpensive. So let's get down to it. First, we will need several nice clean rags. Second, a soft nylon brush. I just use an old toothbrush. Third, a container of hot water, and make sure the container is suitable to dunk all of the magazine parts in. For solvent, I'll be using the household cleaner Simple Green. I really like using Simple Green on all of my box type magazines. First, Simple Green is highly effective at breaking up carbon and degreasing metal parts. Second, Simple Green is very easy to handle. It's a water-based solvent, is non-toxic, and biodegradable. So we don't have to worry about using harsh chemicals. Third, Simple Green is very inexpensive. I usually buy it by the gallon jug and just refill this spray bottle. But a gallon jug runs $10 or $11 at one of the big box discount stores. In addition, Simple Green has a myriad of uses as a cleaner and degreaser in the house and the garage. So it's a very economically efficient solvent. On the downside, and there's a downside to everything, is that because Simple Green is water-based, corrosion can become an issue. Although it's a terrific gun parts cleaner, and note that I said gun parts cleaner, you don't want your firearm or any firearm parts to be exposed to Simple Green for any length of time due to the potentiality of corrosion. I won't use Simple Green as a gun cleaner, not because it is ineffective as such. Any of the product trapped within the component or device will tend to cause corrosion in the metallic structures. Therefore, I'm disinclined to use Simple Green anywhere there may be cracks or crevices for water or moisture to hide, such as slide assemblies or lower assemblies. If you're going to use Simple Green, make sure you're down to the piece parts. When you use Simple Green, you want to make sure that all of the product and any rinse water used along with Simple Green can be eliminated entirely. There's a big myth on the internet that's been going around for some time, is that Simple Green is not safe to be used on any aluminum component. There is an element of truth to that, because the water-based solvent will tend to attack aluminum structures because aluminum, like steel, oxidizes. The truth is that Simple Green will attack aluminum structures with prolonged exposure. But there's this myth going around that if you took Simple Green and sprayed it on an airliner, the aircraft would disappear right before your eyes. And that's simply not true. You just want to limit the amount of time aluminum and or steel-based structures are exposed to Simple Green. The final item we'll need for this project is some LPS1. If any of you out there have worked in or around the aviation industry in the last 50 years or so, you will certainly be familiar with the LPS products. First, I want to reiterate, this is LPS number 1. LPS makes many products. Among them are LPS numbers 2 and 3. Those are very different products with very different applications. So we're talking about LPS number 1. LPS number 1 is a greaseless lubricant. This is important because you want to refrain from using gun oil on or around your box type magazines. Prolonged and repeated exposure to gun oils can damage your ammunition. Gun oils tend to seep into the primers, and once the primers are compromised and penetrated, your round will not go off. So we want to keep lubrication of magazines to an absolute minimum. There's another big myth floating around in the gun community that if you wave a bottle of gun oil over a box of ammunition, it will automatically ruin all the ammunition. And that's not true either. Essentially, what we're worried about is prolonged and repeated exposure to gun oils. Some ammunition primers are sealed better than others, and there have been tests where ammunition has been purposely contaminated with gun oils and there were no failures. But the best practice is to keep the lubrication to an absolute minimum. A lot of people will tell you don't use lubrication on your magazines at all. I don't necessarily disagree with that. If you're not going to be really careful and keep the lubrication to a minimum and highly controlled, I think none is better than some. But if you're very careful, we can improve the performance of the magazines and extend the magazine's useful life through the judicious use of the appropriate materials. Although LPS 1 is marketed primarily as a lubricant, it has other useful characteristics. Most importantly, LPS 1 prevents or inhibits corrosion. Second, it displaces moisture. I've seen some pretty nifty demonstrations of LPS 1 back when I used to go to aviation trade shows. One of the big things they did with LPS 1 is they would take an electric motor that was either running on batteries or running off of a socket plugged into the wall, and they would have the motor running and they would spray it down with LPS and then throw the motor into a vat of water and the motor would continue to run underwater. LPS is also safe for use on delicate electronics, and it's safe for use on most paints and plastics. The big downside to LPS 1 is that it doesn't last very long. The coating degrades relatively quickly, and that's the primary reason I clean and treat my magazines after each range session. LPS 1 is also very cost effective. It's inexpensive. Aerosol cans like this run $10 or $11, and you can also buy non-aerosol liquid versions in gallon or I think even 5-gallon jugs. I prefer to use the aerosol just because it's more convenient. A word of caution: somehow along the way in the last 50 years, some genius in the government determined that LPS 1 was hazardous. I think it's because LPS is flammable and it does burn. So observe the no smoking and no ignition sources when you're using this. It's not like starting fluid or ether, but it is combustible. And because it's now a hazmat designation on the MSDS cards, it's now very expensive to ship. So if you're going to buy any of these types of products, you're probably better off going to a local industrial supply house or something like that. If you go onto LPS's website, they can tell you where to get it, or just call the folks at the local airport repair shop to find out how they get their LPS, because you can end up paying twice as much for shipping as the product costs. The government is now saying, oh, LPS 1, 2, and 3 are dangerous, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I've been using this stuff for decades. It's not like I have Dane Bramage from it. I think I forgot to mention, one of the most important characteristics of LPS1, besides its corrosion resistance and lubricity, is that it will not attract dust and dirt. That permits your magazines to run better, and it makes it easier to clean as well. We're going to clean this 308 mag, and you're going to see it's not very dirty at all, even though it's been through a significant range session. So let's get started. Let me clear this stuff out of the way and we'll get going here. Okay, so first we're just going to take our little spray bottle of Simply Green and just hose down the parts with the solvent. You can go a little crazy with this stuff because it's not going to hurt anything, so long as you limit the exposure. And now you're going to let that sit for about 2 minutes. Okay, we're coming up on our 2 minutes. If you have a heavily fouled or really dirty magazine, you can take a soft nylon brush and hit the real tough areas. This magazine probably will not need that. It's fairly clean, but because this gets treated periodically. I'm only doing one magazine. Normally I'll take all my range magazines, typically 3 or 4 of them, and do them all. So now that we're about 2 minutes, we're just going to take a clean rag and gently wipe our components down here. Be very careful when wiping down your magazine spring. You don't want to stretch or deform the spring at all. If you remember in our previous videos, we talked about spring set and spring stretching. Now that's not a good idea. So you just want to quickly go over there and get any dirt and fouling that may be on the magazine. And you don't have to make a huge deal out of it. This magazine spring is pretty clean. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but I'm getting a little bit of dirt on it, dirt off of it. I'll do the base plate here. And finally we'll do the mag body. And take your rag, shove it inside there, and pull it through. Once we're cleaned and degreased, you just want to simply take your parts and give them a dunk in the hot water, or warm water if you choose, just to get the residual simple green off the component. Once your parts have been dunked, you're just going to kind of shake them off to get the excess water off and put them on a clean towel. Doesn't take much. This is a water-based solvent, so the excess comes off quite easily. I'll just throw the base plate in there for a couple of seconds. And we're done with the water. Now all we want to do is dry off the components. So we'll take our dry rag here. Alright, so now we've gently towel dried all of the components. And the reason I use this magazine is because you see here that the follower on this design is riveted on. So this follower doesn't come completely off. And of course I'm concerned about moisture between these two components. I don't know if you can see that in the camera too well. But I want to make sure that there's no moisture remaining in there. So I can't really do this on camera, but behind me I have some compressed air. make sure that's nice and dry. Let's move on to our treatments. Okay, so now we have our magazine spring here. I like to do all the springs at once and do them first, and I'll show you why. Now I'm just going to take our can of LPS1 and just, you don't have to be gentle about it. You really want to just coat all the areas of the spring. This will certainly not damage anything. Once your springs are all coated, simply shake off the excess into your rag and stick the spring aside. Then you can use your overspray on the existing rags to go over your magazine components. I like to shoot a little bit up into the mag as well. It certainly won't hurt anything. LPS1 tends to dry much faster on uncoated metals rather than painted structures or plastic. So what I like to do is, after it's set for just a few minutes, just go over the painted and plastic parts to make sure any excess lubrication is gone. You don't want it to be wet. And our mag body looks pretty good here. I like to do the magazines first before I clean the guns. So I can just set these aside and I can be assured these components will be 100% dry after I'm done cleaning the guns. After you've inspected all the treated components to make sure that the film of lubricant is dry, you're ready to reassemble your magazine. All right, now that your mag is back together, you should notice that the components, including the exterior, should just have a little bit of a sheen to it. And there should be a very slight increase in the lubricity of your components. Again, you don't want your magazine or any of the subcomponents wet with LPS1. You want it dry with just a hint of the product on it. I use the same method on all of my box magazines, whether they're made of steel, plastic, or aluminum, and this method works very, very well. I've never had any problems or issues. Once the gun and all the mags are back together, what I like to do is load up each magazine with a few snap caps and manually cycle the weapon just to make sure the magazine is feeding okay and that the gun is feeding properly. Also, I like to inspect the snap caps to make sure that they're coming out dry. I don't want any wet lubricant coming out on the snap caps. If there is, you're not dry enough. Once all of your functional checks are complete, your rinse water can simply go down the drain. All of your rags can go directly into the washing machine for reuse. And load up your mags again, ready for the next round. Again, there are many ways to successfully clean magazines. This one just seems to work out the best for me from an effectiveness, cost, and efficiency standpoint. So thanks for watching. Questions and enlightening comments are always welcome. Please subscribe if you like what you see. This is the Suburban Sentinel. Shoot safely, everybody.